if the Moro reflex is retained, what we're going to see is lots of those startle responses and a high state of stress all the time, because those stress chemicals are getting released chronically in their body versus just occasionally. So they're in that high state of fight or flight all the time.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica, and this is All Things Sensory by Harkla.
We are both certified occupational therapy assistants, and together with Harkla, we are on a mission to empower parents, therapists, and educators to help raise confident and strong children of all abilities.
On this podcast, we chat about all things sensory, diving into special needs, occupational therapy, parenting, self-care, overall health and wellness, and so much more.
We are here to provide raw, honest, and fun strategies, ideas, and information for parents, therapists, and educators, as well as other professionals to implement into daily life.
Thank you so much for joining us.
We are so excited to share our SPD month giveaway. This is a huge giveaway, and it runs from October 1st to October 18th. Now, when you enter to win, our grand prize winner will receive one of everything. Yes, the entire line of physical and digital products from Harkla, which is absolutely crazy. Now, we also have some great prizes for our first, second, and third runner-ups. So make sure you use this as a reminder to go and enter the giveaway now. It will be linked below. Good luck.
Hey there, welcome back to All Things Sensory by Harkla. We're thrilled to have you here today for another great, wonderful, exciting episode. I'm Rachel.
You forgot to say unique.
That's unique. This one is unique.
Okay, I'm Jessica.
Yeah, and we are two very passionate occupational therapy assistants who have been practicing for 11 years now, over 11 years. We are moms. We just love talking about all things sensory, primitive reflexes, child development. And if this is your first time listening, thanks for being here. We hope this is an episode that makes you stick around for more.
We are going to talk about specifically the fear paralysis reflex and the Moro reflex. We got a comment on one of our YouTube videos, and somebody asked us why the Moro and fear paralysis reflex weren't integrating when they've been working on it with, I'm assuming with their child, for about 3 months. They haven't seen any positive results. Why is this happening? So we're going to talk about what these two reflexes are, how they're connected, and talk about the functional implications, and then what's needed for these two reflexes to integrate successfully, because I do think that these ones need more than other ones in some ways.
They need more than just the exercises and activities.
And I think all of the reflexes probably need more than just the exercises, but these ones...
This is like the catalyst into all of the other reflexes.
Yeah.
So if we don't have what we need in addition to the exercises, then I think the other reflexes will have a hard time integrating as well.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's jump in. Let's start first what the fear paralysis reflex is. This is one that isn't in our digital course. It is one that we have spent the last few years learning more about and working on integrating into our practices. And really the fear paralysis is a reflex that is only in utero. It develops around like 6 to 8 weeks in utero. So really when that embryo is fresh and developing.
When it's fresh
in there, freshly implanted and fertilized. And the beautiful thing about this one is that it integrates kind of into the Moro reflex, and we don't see the fear paralysis reflex after the baby has been born. We shouldn't. So what the FPR, I'm going to abbreviate it, the FPR does is, let's say mom is in a car accident when, she's newly pregnant. And what the reflex does is it basically tells the fetus to like play dead and freeze and not take any additional resources from mom, so that mom can deal with her own stuff, make sure she's okay. She just got in a car accident. Let's make sure everything's safe. We're not going to take any additional resources. Mom, you take care of you. And then once we're safe and everything's good, then the baby kind of comes out of that paralysis and starts like taking things from mom again and starts to continue on with developing. So it basically is a freeze response in utero.
Yeah, for safety purposes.
For safety. Yes, for everyone. Safety for everyone. Yeah.
So then the Moro reflex, which is developed in utero as fear paralysis is integrating, essentially. The Moro reflex really appears during the vaginal birth process. So as baby goes through the birth canal and comes out to the world, they take their first breath, their arms open, their eyes open. That's that Moro reflex. And then throughout infancy, when baby is startled, when they experience a sudden movement or a sudden noise or a sudden touch, that Moro reflex activates, sends a bunch of chemicals, stress chemicals through baby's body to alert the caregiver that something has happened to the baby. So it's really for survival. Baby will have a physical response where their arms and legs open, their eyes will open wide, they'll take a deep intake of breath, kind of like what they do when they're born, and then they will cry and then flex in to cling to their caregiver, again, for safety purposes.
Now, this one's really interesting because in order for the reflex, the Moro, to integrate, baby needs to startle and then be comforted by the caregiver in order to signify to their brain, I'm startled, I'm safe, and I have that safety mechanism. And, you know, there's a lot of things out there on the internet that are saying like swaddling is bad, cry it out is bad, like all of these things. And we're not here to say like one way or another, but if you think about that from like a developmental biological standpoint, my mindset is if baby is swaddled all the time and they don't startle, that can negatively impact that reflex from integrating. Also, if baby is, you know, left in their crib and they're crying for a caregiver and those needs aren't being met, then biologically, what is that telling them? Like, I'm not safe, right? So those are just a few things to think about wherever you are on the continuum of child development, just food for thought.
Yeah. So the Moro reflex should be integrated around 6 months of age. And we see that more mature startle response appear as Moro integrates. And this allows the child and the adult later in life to startle and have that startle response, but then come back to baseline very easily. So if the Moro reflex is retained, what we're going to see is lots of those startle responses and a high state of stress all the time because those stress chemicals are getting released chronically in their body versus just occasionally. So they're in that high state of fight or flight all the time.
Yeah, and so when we are in that state of fight or flight chronically, we see more sensory challenges, we see potentially allergies, we see asthma, we see that we see those health conditions as well that, you know, on their own need to be like, okay, my child has these health challenges or these other issues. But then when we really go and unpeel the banana or the onion, whatever we're peeling,
the banana,
you're seeing, I guess bananas only have one peel. So you just peel it back once.
It needs to be an onion.
An onion, yeah. Onion. So you peel the layers of the onion and you're like, oh, okay, we had a stressful, traumatic birth. I swaddled my baby every minute of every day. And you just start to see like maybe these allergies, these sensory challenges are related to a Moro reflex. So let's address there. I also just have to share a quick story about the fear paralysis reflex. I had a client who came to me for a reflex intensive, and you know, after the first day, we were talking about the fear paralysis reflex, and mom went home and was like, oh my gosh, I worked in law enforcement during my pregnancy and it was very stressful and very traumatic. And she's like, I always wondered like if that impacted my child's ability to integrate, or if she didn't know about the reflex back then, but she's like, I always wondered if it impacted my child. And we definitely noticed some of those fear paralysis symptoms. And it was like that aha moment of like, oh my gosh. And it's like, not to make anyone feel guilty or like it's their fault, because you only know what you know, right? Like, I was pregnant during COVID. I'm sure that royally messed up everything.
That's why Trip the way he is.
Right? And it's like, gosh, we're all doing the best that we can. But at least now we know and we can hopefully intervene.
Yes. So like Rachel mentioned, we see those sensory sensitivities, we see those immune responses, we see high anxiety, we might see gravitational insecurities, so where the child avoids playground equipment, they avoid trying new things, they're afraid a lot, they don't like noisy environments, and we see those big responses, those big emotional responses to these activities and these daily things, where it should be like your child should be able to go to the playground and play, but your child is fearful, they cling to you because they can't separate. A lot of that is going to be the Moro reflex.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to the question.
What was the question?
If you know that your child, your clients have a retained fear paralysis and or retained Moro reflex, and you have provided your clients with the exercises and activities, and they're consistent, they're doing the exercises, and after a couple of months, you're like, we're not seeing any progress. Why would that be?
Okay. We were talking about this before we were recording, and really one thing that I think is important to keep in mind is like the Moro, the fear paralysis, like these are the foundation of the rest of the reflexes integrating, if that makes sense.
I think we did talk about that at the beginning of the episode.
I can't remember if it was on or off air.
Well, people who are listening will know.
They'll know. They'll like, stop repeating yourselves. But basically, if the Moro reflex isn't integrated, then it's going to be really difficult for the rest of the reflexes to integrate. So with that in mind, some potential factors for the reflex not integrating
in older childhood.
In an older child, when you're working through a reflex integration program, could be things like the child doesn't feel safe in their environment. They don't have those basic biological needs met. They don't feel safe with their caregiver. I think a lot of this, is dependent on the situation, but that's like the number one. Like, if they do not have a secure attachment or a secure relationship with their caregiver or with a caregiver, we need to address that first.
Yep. Another factor is going to be the environment. So what toxins are in the environment? I know this is like big on social media right now, mold and heavy metals. Those really are going to have an impact on the child's ability to integrate this reflex. Whatever stressors they have in their daily life, I think often we don't think that kids have stress, but they do, especially school-age children. School is stressful. Peer relationships can be stressful. Especially if they are struggling with the Moro reflex, they already have high anxiety, and that's going to make those daily activities even more difficult. So that could have an impact too.
Also, sleep. Are they sleeping? Are they sleeping with their mouth closed? Is their tongue suctioning to the roof of their mouth? This is a big one with that vagus nerve regulation. If they're sleeping with open mouth posture, if they're waking up, they're exhausted, they have bags under their eyes, their faces are elongating. Like, we need to make sure that we are addressing those sleep needs as well.
And their oral health. Yes.
Yeah.
Food and nutrition is going to be another one to look at. Oftentimes these kids are going to be picky eaters. They're going to have limited food rapport. Again, it relates to that anxiety and that safety. So they're probably going to be deficient in a lot of nutrients, deficient in protein, micronutrients, dehydration. Those are going to play big factors.
Definitely, yes. And then looking at how much they're moving during the day versus how much time they're on the screen. And the screens are really bad because it's like, what are they missing out on when they are watching 3 hours of YouTube every day? They're not climbing. They're not working their eye muscles. They're not getting that natural sensory input. They're not regulating their nervous system. So that's a big one to just look at. Are they at school all day and they're on screens all day, every day at school? That can be a challenge. So how can we modify that? How can we talk to a school and maybe get an adjustment there and bring back paper and pencils?
I think some schools do a good job. Some do a good job.
I'm taking a vision course, and this school in Florida was like, woohoo, we've got 3,000 Chromebooks for every student, and they're doing all of their work 8 hours a day on Chromebooks.
Wow.
And the presenter is like, woohoo, good job. You know?
So bad.
But you think about it, like, that adds up, right?
It adds up a lot. Yes, absolutely.
So what are they missing out on developmentally when they are on the screens for a long time?
Yep. And then the next one is getting outside. How often is this child going outside? Are they going outside first thing in the morning? Are they going outside before bedtime? Are they walking, running, playing, jumping, climbing, kind of going along with, what you just said about screen time? Like, where's the balance there? But just being outside in nature with natural light is so important, especially for those chemicals, those stress chemicals, the melatonin for sleep. If we're not getting outside in the morning and in the evening, that's huge.
Yeah. So for this person who asked this question, why isn't this Moro reflex integrating? Why isn't the fear paralysis reflex integrating? We are doing all the things. Go through these things and really take inventory of what the house looks like, what the environment looks like, what your connection looks like. And if you're just, do your starfish every day, get down, do your start. Like, if it's just like, do this, like, it's not going to integrate. We have to build that connection. We have to build that rapport and take it back to the basics, maybe move on to the next reflex and see what happens.
Yeah, you can take a break and work on a different reflex for a while as well and see if you notice any changes as well.
Yes.
It's a good call.
Yes.
Hopefully this was helpful. If anyone has any other questions about any reflexes or anything we talked about, you can send us a message on Instagram. We're at All Things Sensory Podcast. You can also leave us a question in the form that is linked in the show notes, and we will answer your question on the show.
Yep. Leave us a review, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening. We truly appreciate those reviews more than you know.
All right. We'll be back with another episode next week.
Okay, bye. Thank you so much for listening to All Things Sensory by Harkla.
If you want more information on anything mentioned in the show, head over to harkla.co/podcast to get the show notes.
If you have any follow-up questions, the best place to ask those is in the comments on the show notes or message us on our Instagram account, which is at Harkla_family or at All Things Sensory Podcast. If you just search Harkla, you'll find us there.
Like we mentioned before, our podcast listeners get 10% off their first order at Harkla. Whether it's for one of our digital courses or one of our sensory swings, the discount code SENSORY will get you 10% off. That's SENSORY.
Head to harkla.co/sensory to use that discount code right now.
We are so excited to work together to help create confident kids all over the world. While we make every effort to share correct information, we're still learning.
We will double check all of our facts, but realize that medicine is a constantly changing science and art.
One doctor or therapist may have a different way of doing things from another.
We are simply presenting our views and opinions on how to address common sensory challenges, health-related difficulties, and what we have found to be beneficial that will be as evidence-based as possible.
By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or your child.
Consult your child's pediatrician or therapist for any medical issues that he or she may be having.
This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast.
Thanks so much for listening.